Welcome, dear viewers. Thank you so much for all the love you've shown to the channel over the past week. Starting this week, there will be exclusive scary episodes for our channel members. Join our membership at just 99 cents per month. Enjoy. I never should have taken that basement storage room job at the Kennedy Space Center. The listing seemed perfect. Night shift, minimal supervision, good pay for a college dropout like me. The job description was simple. Organize old files, catalog equipment, maintain inventory. They even provided housing at the staff apartments nearby. For someone who'd been couch surfing at friends' places for months, it was exactly what I needed. My name is Tom Harlow, and until 3 weeks ago, I was just another 25-year-old Florida screw-up trying to get my life together. Now I'm typing this from a motel outside Titusville, with the blinds drawn and the door triple locked, jumping at every shadow. I haven't slept more than 2 hours at a stretch since I found those files. Since I learned what NASA's been doing at the Cape Canaveral facility since 1983. I should back up. My first night on the job, my supervisor Keith walked me through the cavernous sub-basement storage facility. "We're digitizing everything," he explained, gesturing to row after row of metal filing cabinets. 40 years of paperwork that needs sorting. Most of it's routine. Launch logs, equipment inventories, personnel records. Keith was a heavy-set guy in his 50s with thinning grey hair and the resigned demeanour of someone counting down to retirement. "Don't bother reading anything," he advised. "Just scan the heading, log the date, and move on. You'll never finish otherwise." The basement was a maze, concrete walls and fluorescent lights that buzzed in that way that makes your teeth hurt after a few hours. The air smelled stale, with undertones of mildew and something metallic I couldn't place. "Last guy quit without notice," Keith mentioned as he showed me the time clock. "Just disappeared, left all his stuff in the apartment too." He shrugged. "Management says if you last a month, you can have it." Something about the way he said it made my skin prickle. But I needed this job, and the apartment was a major upgrade from my friend Dave's pull-out couch. For the first week, everything was fine. Mind-numbing, but fine. I sorted through endless documentation on satellite deployments, routine maintenance logs, and staff transfer requests. I developed a rhythm: sort, catalog, stack, repeat. The nights passed in a blur of coffee and paperwork. Then came my 8th night. I'd reached the back corner of the facility, an area that looked like it hadn't been touched in decades. The filing cabinets here were older models, covered in a layer of dust so thick I had to wipe my hands on my pants after touching each drawer. That's when I found the first file labelled Portal. It was tucked between routine reports on the Space Shuttle Columbia, in a drawer that should have contained only launch documentation from 1983. The folder was thicker than the others, its edges worn from frequent handling and sealed with aging tape marked classified. I should have logged it and moved on. That's what Keith had told me to do with anything marked classified. But something about this one caught my attention. Maybe the way it was hidden between mundane files rather than in the secured sections, or maybe just the word itself. Portal. I broke the seal. Inside were photographs. Grainy black and white images of what looked like a doorway constructed from gleaming metal, standing alone in an otherwise empty room. Along with the photos were pages of calculations, diagrams, and a list of names with dates beside them. At the top of the first page, a heading: Project Portal, Phase 1, Trials. I didn't understand most of the technical jargon, but certain phrases jumped out at me: interdimensional gateway, subject molecular stability, and most disturbingly, acceptable casualty threshold. That should have been enough to make me close the file and walk away. Instead, I tucked it into my backpack before resuming my normal cataloguing routine. That night, I took it home to my new apartment and read every single page. If I had known then what I know now, I would have burned those papers, quit my job, and gotten as far from Cape Canaveral as possible. But I didn't. Instead, I went back the next night, determined to find more. And God help me, I did. After finding that first file, I couldn't stop thinking about it. When I returned to work the next night, I made a beeline for that same dusty corner. I needed to know more. It took me 3 hours of methodical searching before I found another portal file, this one from 1985. Inside were more detailed schematics of the doorway structure I'd seen in the first file's photos. A handwritten note was paperclipped to one diagram. Second stabilization chamber complete, ready for human trials. Human trials. The words made my stomach turn. The file contained personnel profiles, 5 men, scientists and military types, with the designation Voyager Team 1. Their photos showed confident faces, unaware of what awaited them. Only one had survived past the first excursion according to the attached report, and his psychological evaluation afterward contained a single underlined phrase: subject exhibits significant cognitive divergence. I was so encompassed in reading that I didn't hear Keith approach. Find something interesting. His voice made me jump. I fumbled, trying to slide the papers back into their folder. Just cataloguing, I stammered. Keith's eyes narrowed, focusing on the classified stamp. Where'd you find this? I pointed vaguely toward the cabinet. Mixed in with shuttle documentation. He took the file from my hands, glanced at the label, then looked back at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Some things get misfiled, he said carefully. I'll take care of this one. Something in his tone made me nervous. Is it important? Keith ignored my question. You're making good progress back here, but we need the 90s material done first. Switch to Section D tomorrow night. He tucked the file under his arm and walked away, leaving me with the distinct impression I'd crossed a line. I waited until I heard the storage room door close before returning to my search, this time more cautiously. By morning, I hadn't found any more portal files, but I had memorized the cabinet locations containing records from 1983 through 1990, the apparent active period of the project based on what I'd seen. The following night, I arrived early. Keith was at his desk and gave me a nod that seemed normal enough. Maybe I'd overreacted. Section D, he reminded me, not looking up from his computer. Got it, I said, grabbing my cart and heading off. But I didn't go to Section D. I waited until Keith left for his usual 10 p.m. smoke break, then made my way back to the 88 to 89 cabinets. With trembling hands, I pulled open drawers, rifling through folders as quickly and quietly as possible. That's when I found it, a thick manila envelope tucked into the very back of a drawer, unlabeled except for a stamped sequence of numbers. Inside was a bound document titled Portal Project Operational Protocols. I nearly dropped it when I saw what it contained. A list of rules. 7 of them precisely formatted on official NASA letterhead dated October 17th, 1988. Portal Project. Operational Protocols. Level 4. Clearance Required Facility. 7B. Sub-Level 3. Activation sequence must be performed precisely as documented. Deviation will result in unstable aperture formation. No traveler may remain beyond the portal for more than 57 minutes. Molecular degradation begins at 62 minutes. No metallic objects may pass through the portal. Organic matter and silicate-based materials only. Communication with travelers is prohibited once transit is complete. Responses received are not from original personnel. If a traveler returns exhibiting any physical anomalies, discoloration, asymmetry, altered vocalization, immediate containment protocol must be initiated. In the event of unauthorized return, flood chamber with halon gas. Do not attempt physical intervention. If you hear knocking from within the portal when it's inactive, do not acknowledge it. Do not respond. Do not record it. Jesus Christ. What the hell were they doing down there? I memorized the rules, photographed each page with my phone, then carefully replaced everything exactly as I'd found it. When Keith returned from his break, I was dutifully working in Section D, cataloguing launch manifests from 1992 as instructed. "Everything going all right?" he asked, studying my face. "Fine," I replied, keeping my eyes on my work. "Just routine stuff in here." Keith lingered a moment longer than necessary. "Good. One more thing, your keycard. It's only programmed for this level and above. Sub-levels are restricted." I looked up. "I don't have any reason to go to the sub-levels." "Of course not," he said. "Just making sure you understand the boundaries." After he left, I found myself reading the manifest in front of me more carefully. It listed equipment transferred from Facility 7B, Sub-Level 3, to off-site storage, the same location mentioned in the protocols. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those rules, especially number 7, knocking from within an inactive portal. The thought made me break out in a cold sweat. I spent hours researching online, searching for any mention of a NASA portal project. Nothing came up except conspiracy theories and science fiction stories. Nothing credible. But then, what had I expected? If this was real, it would be buried under layers of classification. The next day, I called in sick. I needed to think. What I'd found was either evidence of the most significant secret in human history, or some elaborate hoax. But why create such detailed files for a hoax and then bury them in storage? I drove to a library several towns over and used their computer to search newspaper archives from 1983 through 1990. I was looking for anything unusual: missing NASA personnel, unexplained phenomena, sudden reassignments. After hours of searching, I found a small article from February 1989 about a fire at Cape Canaveral that claimed the lives of 3 NASA scientists. Their names matched 3 from the Voyager Team 2 list I'd seen in the files. The official cause was listed as an equipment malfunction. But now I wondered, had they come back wrong? That evening, as I was preparing to return to work, my phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "We know what you found. 7B access granted. Tonight only. Follow all protocols." I stared at the text message for a solid 20 minutes, my thumb hovering over the delete button. This had to be a trap. Keith had caught me, reported me, and now someone was setting me up to what? Fire me? Arrest me? Or maybe they genuinely wanted to show me something. I grabbed my backpack, slipped my phone and wallet inside, and headed to my car. The drive to the Space Center was eerily quiet that night, the roads almost empty. The security guard at the main gate barely glanced at my ID badge before waving me through. Business as usual, which made the situation feel even more surreal. Instead of heading to the main storage facility, I parked in the visitor's lot near Launch Complex 39. My hands were shaking as I pulled up the text message again, half expecting it to have disappeared. It hadn't. Another text arrived. Northwest service entrance. Door unlocked. 11:30 p.m. It was 11:17. I sat in my car for another 5 minutes, debating whether to drive away and never come back. In the end, curiosity won. I had to know what was behind those rules, what they'd been doing in that facility since 1983. The Northwest Service entrance was a nondescript door on the back side of a building I'd never paid attention to before. A bland, 2-story structure that could have housed anything from offices to maintenance equipment. True to the message, the door was unlocked. Inside was a narrow hallway illuminated by emergency lighting. The air was different here, cooler, with that same metallic smell I'd noticed in the storage basement, only stronger. I followed the corridor to an elevator at the end, its only button marked SL3, sub-level 3. I hesitated, then pressed it. The elevator descended with barely a sound, the smoothness of the ride suggesting frequent maintenance despite the facility's apparent obscurity. The doors opened to reveal another corridor, this one clinically white and brightly lit. A man was waiting for me. Tall, African-American, with a closely cropped grey beard and the ramrod posture of military training. He wore a simple black polo shirt and slacks rather than any official uniform. "Mr. Harlow," he said, not offering his hand. I'm Dr. Wilson. You've been curious about our old projects. I swallowed hard. You sent the text, Wilson nodded. Not me personally, but yes. We've been monitoring your access to certain files. You found the protocols. The rules, I said. For the portal. Yes. His expression didn't change. Would you like to see it? My mouth went dry. It's still operational. Wilson turned without answering and began walking down the corridor. I followed, noticing the cameras mounted at regular intervals along the ceiling. Project Portal began in 1983, Wilson said as we walked. A theoretical physicist named Alexander Bennett discovered what he called thin spots in space-time while analysing anomalous radiation readings from early shuttle missions. He theorised that with enough energy focused correctly, these thin spots could be expanded into traversable pathways. Pathways to where? I asked. Wilson stopped at a heavy door marked 7B and swiped his badge. That's the question, isn't it? Initially, we believed it was simply another location in our universe, perhaps a form of instantaneous travel. The early results seemed to confirm this. Small probes sent through returned with atmospheric samples consistent with Earth. The door swung open to reveal an observation room. One wall was made entirely of thick glass, beyond which I could see a large chamber housing what could only be the portal. A perfect circular frame, roughly 12 feet in diameter, mounted on a raised platform. It was inactive now, just a ring of some silvery metal inscribed with markings I couldn't identify. Holy shit, I whispered. It was real, all of it. The rules you found, Wilson continued, were established after the Voyager 2 incident in 1988. What happened? I asked, unable to take my eyes off the portal. Wilson's voice grew quieter. The first team, 5 men, went through in 86. 4 returned. They reported a landscape similar to Earth. Trees, water, breathable air. The mission was deemed a success, despite losing Dr. Fulton. He just stayed behind. No. He attempted to return with the others. The portal rejected him. We still don't understand why some can pass back through and others can't. Wilson moved to a control panel and typed in a sequence. Lights flickered around the portal's frame. The second team went in 88, 7 men, all returned. Something in his tone made me look away from the portal and at him. But they weren't the same men who left. Wilson's face remained impassive. Physically identical, down to DNA, but behaviourally altered. Subtle at first. Changes in food preferences, sleep patterns, then more significant deviations. One couldn't recognize his own children. Another began writing in a language we've never been able to decipher. The hairs on my arms stood up. Rule 4. Communication with travelers is prohibited once transit is complete. Responses received are not from original personnel. 3 became violent, Wilson continued. Hence, Rule 6. The remaining 4 were contained for study until 1992 when the project was officially suspended. Officially? Wilson gave me a long look. Funding was redirected, the program renamed. The research continued under different management. Military? Let's say, interested parties. He turned back to the control panel. The portal has been inactive for most of the past decade. We've learned that it follows cycles, periods of increased stability when passage is possible. And now? We're approaching another peak in the cycle. Next Tuesday, to be precise. The portal frame began to hum, a low vibration I could feel in my chest. A faint shimmer appeared within the circle, like heat rising from hot asphalt. This is just a diagnostic activation, Wilson explained, not a full aperture that requires considerably more power. I stepped closer to the glass. Why are you showing me this? Why not just fire me for snooping in classified files? Wilson smiled for the first time, though it didn't reach his eyes. Because you have certain qualities we look for. Curiosity, persistence, limited personal attachments. Jesus. They'd been investigating me. "We need a new observer," Wilson said. "Someone to monitor and record without direct involvement. The previous one, your predecessor in the storage job, became too emotionally invested in the subjects. What happened to him? He volunteered to go through." Wilson's expression darkened slightly. "He broke protocol, took metal through, a watch. Family heirloom, apparently. I remembered Rule 3. No metallic objects may pass through the portal." "What happened?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. He returned, partially. Wilson nodded toward a door at the far end of the observation room. "He's in containment now." My blood ran cold. "He's still alive?" "In a manner of speaking." The shimmer within the portal frame suddenly intensified, taking on a blue-green hue that filled the chamber with eerie light. I felt drawn to it, like it was pulling at something inside me. "Fascinating, isn't it?" Wilson said, observing my reaction. "Everyone feels it differently. For some, it's a pull. Others describe a repulsion. Dr. Bennett said it was like staring into the eyes of God." I tore my gaze away from the portal. "You still haven't explained why you're showing me this?" "Because we're offering you a choice, Mr. Harlow." Wilson switched off the portal, the shimmer fading gradually. "Continue your current job, with the understanding that anything you've seen is classified under national security laws, or join us as an observer for the next phase of testing. And if I choose neither, if I walk away, go to the press?" Wilson smiled again, this cold, professional smile. "No one has chosen that option so far." The threat was clear enough. "The job pays significantly better," he added, "and you'll have full access to all historical data on the project. Satisfy that curiosity of yours." "When do you need an answer?" I asked. "Now." I looked back at the portal, now dark and dormant. I thought about the rules, about the people who had gone through and come back wrong, about whatever was left of my predecessor in the containment room. I also thought about my empty apartment, my non-existent career prospects, my life that had been going nowhere until now. "I want to see him first," I said. "The guy who went through. My predecessor." Wilson considered this for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. Follow me." He led me toward that far door, typing in a code on the keypad beside it. As the door swung open, rule number 7 echoed in my mind. "If you hear knocking from within the portal when it's inactive, do not acknowledge it, do not respond, do not record it." I was about to find out why. The containment area was a stark contrast to the clean clinical observation room. It reminded me of a prison hospital ward, all concrete and steel, with harsh lighting that cast sharp shadows. The air felt heavier here, tinged with the smell of antiseptic and something else I couldn't place. Something rotten yet metallic. "We maintain minimal staff in this section," Wilson explained as we passed through another security door. "Primarily automated monitoring. Human interaction has proven problematic." "How many are in containment?" I asked, noticing the numbered doors lining the corridor. "Currently, just your predecessor." Wilson stopped at a door marked C7. "Previously, we held up to 12 subjects at once. The survivors from Voyager teams 2 and 3 primarily." "Survivors?" I echoed. "I thought you said they all came back." "Physically, yes." Wilson typed in another code on the door's keypad. "But containment takes its toll. Some self-terminated. Others had to be neutralized when their conditions progressed." The door slid open, revealing an observation window that looked into a sparsely furnished room. A bed, a desk, a toilet, all bolted to the floor. No loose objects, nothing that could serve as a weapon. At first, I didn't see anyone inside. Then I noticed movement in the corner. A figure hunched against the wall, partially concealed by shadows. "Mr. Abernathy," Wilson called through the intercom. "You have a visitor." The figure stirred and slowly turned toward us. I stifled a gasp as he moved into the light. It was a man, or had been once. His proportions were wrong, limbs slightly too long, torso too narrow. His skin had a greyish cast to it, almost translucent in places, revealing a network of veins that pulsed with a fluid darker than blood. But it was his face that made my stomach lurch, features slightly off-center as though his skin had slid a few millimeters to the right of where it should have been. His eyes were the worst part, pale blue, too large, and seeming to look in slightly different directions. "That's Frank Abernathy," Wilson said quietly. "He worked in records management for 3 years before discovering the portal files, much as you did. He joined as an observer in 2018, then volunteered for transit in 2022. The man, Abernathy, moved closer to the window, his gait unnatural, like he was relearning how to walk with each step. He pressed a hand against the glass. His fingers were too long, the joints swollen and distorted. "Tom," he said, his voice a dry rasp that seemed to come from somewhere other than his throat. "Tom Harlow." A cold wave washed over me. "He knows my name." Wilson frowned. "That's unusual. We haven't briefed him on personnel changes." Abernathy's misaligned mouth twisted into what might have been a smile. "They told me. They know you're coming." "Who told you?" Wilson demanded, leaning closer to the intercom. "The ones on the other side." Abernathy's speech suddenly became clearer, smoother, as though someone else had momentarily taken control of his vocal cords. "They've been waiting for Tom." I took an involuntary step back. "What the fuck is he talking about?" Abernathy pressed his face against the glass, those mismatched eyes somehow managing to focus directly on me. "Your grandfather, Edward Harlow, mission specialist, 1983. The blood drained from my face. My grandfather had indeed worked for NASA, though I barely remembered him. He died when I was 5. My mother rarely spoke about him, and when she did, it was always vague. Just that he'd been some kind of engineer who died in an accident at work. "That's not possible," I whispered. "How could he know that?" Wilson's expression had hardened. "We're done here." He reached for the door control. Abernathy's hand slammed against the glass with unexpected force. "He's still there, Tom. They kept him. He's waiting for you to open the way back." Wilson pulled me away from the window as Abernathy began to convulse, his body contorting at impossible angles. "Security Protocol Tango 7, Wilson barked into his radio. "Medical team to containment C7. As Wilson dragged me back into the corridor, I caught one last glimpse of Abernathy. He had fallen to his knees, but his head was twisted completely backward to maintain eye contact with me, his mouth open in a silent scream. The door slammed shut, cutting off the sight, but not the memory of those eyes. Eyes that knew things about me no stranger should know. Wilson led me swiftly back through the containment area, neither of us speaking until we reached the main corridor. My mind was racing, trying to process what I just witnessed. Not just the physical deformities, but the impossible knowledge Abernathy had possessed. "That wasn't in his file," Wilson finally said as we entered the elevator. "About your grandfather." "How could he possibly know?" I demanded. "I barely knew myself. My mum never talked about him." Wilson's expression was unreadable. "We've observed this before. Returned subjects occasionally display knowledge they shouldn't possess. Information about people connected to the project, even peripherally. My grandfather was part of this. Of Portal." The elevator began its ascent. Wilson remained silent for several seconds before answering. Edward Harlow was part of the original engineering team that built the first Portal framework. He wasn't supposed to go through, he wasn't cleared for transit. But there was an incident during early testing, a sudden aperture formation while he was performing maintenance. My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. "He was pulled in?" "No," Wilson said. "According to the logs, he walked in voluntarily. No hesitation. Just stepped through as though someone on the other side had called his name." I leaned against the elevator wall, suddenly dizzy. And he never came back. Not as himself, no. Wilson's voice had taken on a clinical detachment. Something returned using his body 3 days later. It was the first indication we had that transit changes people. Your grandfather's case led to the establishment of the first protocols. The elevator doors opened, but I made no move to exit. What happened to him? To the thing that came back? Wilson hesitated. The containment procedures weren't as developed back then. There was an incident. 3 researchers died before they managed to terminate the subject. Subject. Not my grandfather, but the subject. That's why I was hired, isn't it? I said, the realization dawning. Not random chance. You people found me, arranged the job opening. Wilson neither confirmed nor denied it. The question now, Mr. Harlow, is what you intend to do with this information. I stepped out of the elevator on shaky legs. I need time to think. Of course. Wilson followed me out. But not too much time. As I mentioned, the portal reaches peak stability next Tuesday. We'll need an answer before then. And if I say no, if I want nothing to do with this, then you return to your regular duties and we have this conversation with someone else. Wilson handed me a keycard. This will grant you access to the project archives. Everything we have on your grandfather and the early days of Portal. Perhaps it will help you decide. I took the card, noticing my hand was trembling. The rules, I said. The 7 protocols. Are there more you haven't told me? Wilson's expression shifted slightly. The first genuine emotion I'd seen from him. Something like concern, or perhaps fear. Those are the official protocols, yes. But between us, there's an 8th rule, unofficial, unwritten. What is it? Never believe anything that comes back through the portal, no matter how convincing, no matter what it knows or what it offers. It's never what it appears to be. With that, he turned and walked away, leaving me alone in the corridor with the key card and a head full of impossible revelations. I drove home in a daze, the image of Abernathy's distorted face floating before my eyes every time I blinked. My apartment felt foreign when I arrived, as though I'd been gone for years instead of hours. I couldn't bring myself to turn off the lights when I finally crawled into bed, certain that shadows would transform into elongated limbs and misaligned features. Sleep was impossible. Around 4 a.m., I gave up trying and went to my laptop. The keycard Wilson had given me included login credentials for a secure server. I spent the next 3 hours reading through file after file on Project Portal, focusing on the earliest records, 1983, when my grandfather had been involved. The technical details were beyond me, but the incident reports painted a clear enough picture. The first portal had been smaller, experimental, designed to send instrument packages through and nothing more. But during a power fluctuation test on August 17th, 1983, it had activated unexpectedly while my grandfather was adjusting the calibration array. According to multiple witness statements, Edward Harlow had stopped what he was doing, looked into the activated portal with an expression of recognition and joy, and walked through without hesitation or protective gear. 3 days later, after the team had given him up for dead, he returned. The logs described his reappearance as instantaneous and unexpected. Initial medical exams showed no physical abnormalities, and he could recall everything about his life and work. But within hours, discrepancies appeared. He couldn't remember his wife's middle name. He positioned his coffee cup 3 inches from the edge of any surface, always. He spoke of colleagues who had died years earlier as though they were still alive. Then came the incident that had resulted in 3 deaths, described in the file only as extreme physical anomalies manifesting during attempted restraint. The file included a single photo taken during the event, but the image was so distorted, so wrong, that my mind refused to process what I was seeing. I closed it immediately, but it was too late. The glimpse I'd caught would feature in my nightmares for years to come. The final page was a memo authorizing the permanent containment of subject EH, dated 2 weeks after his return. Permanent containment, not termination. A chill ran through me as I realized what that meant. If the memo was accurate, if they hadn't been able to terminate whatever had come back wearing my grandfather's face, he might still be alive, still in containment, somewhere in that facility after 40 years. My phone chirped with a text message, making me jump. Unknown. Number. Just like before. They're lying to you, Tom. I'm not the first observer to find these files, and I'm not the first Abernathy either. Come back tonight. Sub-level 5. See what they're really doing with what comes through. Sub-level 5. Wilson had only shown me sub-level 3. I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the reply button. Part of me wanted to delete it, pack my things, and run as far from Cape Canaveral as possible. Instead, I typed, "How do I get access?" The reply came seconds later. "You already have it. Your grandfather made sure of that. Blood opens the way." Blood opens the way. Those 4 words kept repeating in my mind as I drove back to the Space Center that night. I hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, just sat in my apartment staring at nothing while my brain tried to process everything I'd learned. My grandfather. The portal. Abernathy's twisted body and knowing eyes. Part of me knew I should run, disappear, forget I'd ever seen those files. But another part, the part that had always pushed me to look behind closed doors, to question what I was told, couldn't walk away. Not when I might be standing at the threshold of the biggest discovery in human history. Not when my own blood was somehow connected to it all. The main gate was quiet as before. My regular ID badge got me in without question. Late-night archival work was my job, after all. But instead of heading to the storage facility, I drove to the nondescript building housing the elevator to sub-level 3. My hands trembled slightly as I parked, wondering if I was walking into a trap. I checked my phone one more time. No new messages since the cryptic "Blood opens the way." I took a deep breath and got out of the car. The service entrance was unlocked, just as it had been the previous night. The corridor beyond was dimly lit and empty. I made my way to the elevator, pressed the call button, and waited, half expecting alarms to sound or security to appear. Nothing happened. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, doors sliding open to reveal an empty car. I stepped inside, noticing immediately that something had changed. The control panel now showed buttons for SL1 through SL5, where before I'd only seen SL3. I hesitated, then pressed SL5. The button remained dark, unresponsive. "Blood opens the way," I muttered, recalling the text. What the hell did that mean? Did I need to cut myself? Press my bloody finger to the button like some macabre biometric scanner? I was considering this disturbing possibility when I noticed a small, rectangular panel below the buttons, almost flush with the wall. I might have missed it entirely if not for a hairline seam outlining its shape. I pressed it gently and it slid back to reveal what looked like a standard ID card reader, except the slot was wider, deeper than normal. I pulled out the keycard Wilson had given me, studying it. It appeared ordinary enough, but when I held it to the light at an angle, I could see something embedded within the plastic. A thin, dark sliver, no bigger than a grain of rice. "Blood opens the way," I said again, understanding dawning. Not my blood literally, but my bloodline. My connection to Edward Harlow. The card must contain some kind of genetic marker or identifier linked to my grandfather. I slid the card into the reader. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a soft mechanical whir emanated from inside the panel, and the card was drawn deeper into the slot. A red light flickered, then turned steady green. The button for SL5 illuminated, and the elevator began to descend without me touching anything else. It moved deeper than before, the descent taking nearly twice as long as it had to reach sub-level 3. When the doors finally opened, I found myself in a corridor similar to the others, but clearly older. The design more utilitarian, the technology less sleek. This level had been built in the early days of the project, perhaps even during my grandfather's time. The air was different too, stale, with an undercurrent of ozone and something organic, like overripe fruit. The emergency lighting cast everything in a reddish glow that turned shadows into threatening silhouettes. My keycard remained in the elevator reader, so I couldn't use it to open any doors down here. But as I stepped out, I noticed that the first door in the corridor was already ajar, a thin line of blue-white light spilling from within. An invitation, or a trap. I approached cautiously, listening for any sound of movement. The facility seemed deserted, but the slight mechanical hum of active equipment told me this level wasn't abandoned, just unpopulated. I pushed the door open wider and found myself in what appeared to be an observation room similar to the one on sublevel 3, but much older and clearly designed for a different purpose. Where the upper level had been set up to monitor the portal itself, this room was focused on what came through it. One wall was lined with containment cells, small, transparent chambers connected to monitoring equipment. Most were empty, but 3 contained objects. I approached the nearest one, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. It looked almost like a tree branch, but the proportions were wrong, too thick at one end, tapering to a needle-like point at the other. Its surface had a chitinous quality, like an insect's exoskeleton, and it pulsed with faint bioluminescence. The next cell contained what might once have been a small mammal, rodent-sized, with a recognizable skull structure. But the rest of its anatomy was hideously wrong, limbs elongated and multiplied, skin transparent enough to reveal organs that bore no resemblance to anything earthly. The third cell held something I couldn't begin to categorize, a pulsating mass of tissue that occasionally formed what looked like rudimentary sensory organs before reabsorbing them. Jesus Christ, I whispered, fighting the urge to vomit. These weren't just samples, they were alive, or some version of alive, and judging by the dates on the monitoring equipment displays, they'd been here for decades. Beyond the containment cells was a door marked Analysis. It too was unlocked. Inside was a laboratory space, workbenches crowded with equipment both modern and antiquated. Several computer terminals were active, screens displaying data streams and analysis readouts. I moved to the nearest terminal and found it logged in, displaying what appeared to be a molecular structure rotating slowly in 3 dimensions. The caption beneath identified it as Compound 7734-B, derived from transit subject 12 neural tissue. Navigating through the files, I found hundreds of similar analyses, compounds extracted from transit subjects and studied for their properties. Many were tagged with applications, enhanced cellular regeneration, synaptic reconfiguration, temporal perception modulation. They weren't just studying what came through the portal, they were harvesting it, using it. A file directory labeled EH derivatives caught my eye. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before I selected it. The screen filled with subfolders dated from 1983 through the present year, nearly 4 decades of continuous research. I clicked on the most recent folder and found a video file from just 3 weeks ago. With growing dread, I played it. The footage showed a medical suite. In the center was what looked like a standard hospital bed, but the figure lying on it was anything but standard. The body was recognizably human in its overall shape, but stretched, distorted, the skin mottled with patches of something that looked more like translucent chitin than flesh. The face was mostly obscured by medical equipment, but what I could see of it was wrong. Features asymmetrical, proportions inhuman. A doctor in full hazmat gear was extracting fluid from the figure's arm with a specialized syringe. Subject EH continues to produce viable compound precursors, a voice narrated. Regenerative capacity remains unchanged since initial containment. Recommend continued harvesting at current intervals. I froze the video on a frame where the figure's eyes were visible. Pale blue, exactly like the faded photos of my grandfather I'd seen as a child. The same eyes that had stared out from my mirror my entire life. The room seemed to tilt around me. They'd kept him alive, if you could call that living, for 40 years, harvesting him like a crop. A sound from the outer room snapped me back to awareness, a mechanical whir followed by a soft thud. Someone else had arrived on sub-level 5. I quickly closed the files and moved to the door, peering through the narrow window into the observation room. A figure in a lab coat was moving between the containment cells, checking readouts. It wasn't Wilson. This man was shorter, older, with a shock of white hair. I ducked away from the window, heart pounding. There must be another exit from the lab. I scanned the room and spotted a door at the far end, partially hidden behind a storage cabinet. Moving as quietly as possible, I made my way toward it, freezing when I heard the outer door open. The white-haired scientist had entered the lab. I pressed myself against the wall behind an equipment rack, hardly daring to breathe as the man moved to the terminal I'd just been using. He didn't seem to notice anything amiss, simply logging in with his own credentials and pulling up a different set of files. While his back was turned, I inched toward the rear door. It wasn't locked, thankfully, and I slipped through into a narrow utility corridor that ran behind the laboratory spaces. The passage was poorly lit and cluttered with pipes and conduits, but it seemed to extend the length of the sub-level. I moved as quickly as I dared, following the corridor until I found what I was looking for, a maintenance access ladder that, according to the signage, led up to sub-level 4. As I climbed, my mind raced with what I'd discovered. Whatever had come back through the portal wearing my grandfather's body had become a decades-long source of compounds with properties that defied conventional science. And if they'd done that with him, what about the others? What about Abernathy? Was he destined for the same fate? I emerged onto sub-level 4 through a service hatch, finding myself in what appeared to be a storage area for equipment. It was dark and quiet, with no sign of personnel. I navigated through shelves of machinery until I found a door leading to a main corridor, and from there, located an elevator. This one had standard buttons for all sub-levels, and my regular ID badge was sufficient to activate it. I pressed the button for the ground floor, desperate to get out of the facility and process what I'd seen. As the elevator ascended, my phone vibrated with a new message. Now you see. Not just observers. We're candidates. Raw material. Get out while you still can. I didn't go straight home after escaping the facility. I couldn't risk it, not after what I'd found on sub-level 5. Instead, I drove aimlessly for hours, taking random turns, doubling back, watching my rearview mirror for any sign of pursuit. My mind was a storm of horrific images. My grandfather's deformed body, Abernathy's twisted face, those things in the containment cells. The sun was rising when I finally pulled into the parking lot of a dingy motel off I-95, far enough from Cape Canaveral to feel marginally safe. I paid cash for a room, gave a fake name, and collapsed onto the bed without even removing my shoes. Sleep, when it finally came, brought no relief. Just fragmented nightmares of portals opening in impossible places, of hands reaching through to pull me into darkness. I woke in the late afternoon, drenched in sweat and gasping for breath. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Keith, my supervisor from the storage facility, though I now understood he was much more than that. No voicemails, no texts, just the silent pressure of unanswered calls. I took a long shower, trying to wash away the lingering feeling of contamination from sub-level 5. The hot water did little to calm me, but it helped clear my head enough to think about my next move. I couldn't go back to my apartment. They'd be watching it for sure. I couldn't go to the police. What would I even say? NASA is running a secret portal project and harvesting my mutated grandfather for compounds with impossible properties. I'd be dismissed as a lunatic or worse, quietly taken into custody and returned to Wilson. My only real option was to get as far away as possible, maybe try to document what I'd seen, find a way to release the information anonymously. But even as I considered this, I knew it wasn't that simple. Not anymore. Not after what Abernathy had said about my grandfather. He's still there, Tom. They kept him. He's waiting for you to open the way back. The words haunted me. What if there was some truth to it? What if whatever was left of Edward Harlow could be saved? or at the very least, released from his decades-long torment. And then there was Rule 7 from the protocol. If you hear knocking from within the portal when it's inactive, do not acknowledge it. Do not respond. Do not record it. The rule had seemed strange and ominous when I first read it, but now it took on new significance. If something could knock from the other side of an inactive portal, then there must be some kind of constant connection, even when the aperture wasn't visibly open. A crazy, dangerous idea began to form in my mind. If I could access the portal chamber once more, not as an observer, but as an operator, maybe I could find a way to help my grandfather, or at least end his suffering. My phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number, but I knew who it was. They're looking for you, searching your apartment now. Wilson knows you accessed SL5. I typed back. Who are you? The reply came seconds later. Someone like you. Someone with blood in the project. I hesitated, then asked, how do I shut it down? The portal. The whole project. You don't. Too big. Too many interested parties. But you can disrupt it. How? The portal has two essential components. The aperture mechanism on SL3 you've seen, and the power core on SL2. Damage either, and the next activation fails. I considered this. Security. Minimal on night shift. 2 guards on SL2, automated systems on SL3. Your card will get you to both. It seemed too easy. Why tell me this? Why not do it yourself? There was a long pause before the reply came. I can't go near it anymore. They put something in me when I came back. I get within 50 feet of the portal, and it wakes up, starts tearing me apart from inside. Another message followed quickly. I've tried to warn others before you. They never listen. They always think they can control it, use it. They can't. I stared at the message, trying to decide if I was being manipulated. But why would Wilson or anyone from the project want me to damage the portal? It didn't make sense as a trap. When is the next activation scheduled? I asked. Tuesday, 3 a.m. full aperture for Project Homecoming. What's Project Homecoming? The culmination of 40 years of research. They're going to establish permanent contact with the other side. I felt a chill run through me. That sounds like a bad idea. It's worse than you can imagine. What's on the other side has been influencing them for decades. The researchers, administrators, even security personnel, all compromised to some degree. They think they're in control. They're not. I took a deep breath, trying to process the implications. I'll need to get back in without being seen. They'll be watching for me now. Use the maintenance entrance at the east perimeter. Code 5483. It comes out near the server room on the ground floor. From there you can access SL2 via the freight elevator. I'll guide you. I checked the time. Just past 6 p.m. If I waited until late night, I might have a chance to slip in unnoticed. One more thing, I typed. My grandfather. Is there any way to end it for him? To stop what they're doing? The answer took nearly a minute to arrive. SL5 has an emergency containment protocol. Fire suppression system can flood all cells with halon gas. Panel in the main lab, red cover, key code 1983. Mercy killing. It wasn't what I wanted, but it was better than leaving him to suffer for who knows how many more decades. I'll do it tonight, I decided. Around 2 a.m. Be careful. Remember Rule 7. If you hear knocking while in the portal chamber, even if the portal is inactive, do not respond. Not even if it sounds like someone you know. I checked out of the motel at midnight and drove a rental car back toward Cape Canaveral. I'd spent the intervening hours preparing as best I could, studying the facility layout from memory, planning my approach, steeling myself for what I'd have to do. The maintenance entrance was exactly where my mysterious contact had said it would be, a nondescript door set into an equipment shed near the eastern perimeter fence. The code worked, and I slipped inside. The corridor beyond was narrow and utilitarian, clearly designed for technicians rather than regular personnel. Motion-activated lights flickered on as I moved, illuminating a path that led deeper into the complex. I followed my contact's directions, navigating through service passages until I reached the server room. From there, a short corridor led to the freight elevator, larger and more industrial than the one I'd used before, but operated by the same kind of keycard reader. I swiped Wilson's card, pressed the button for SL2, and began my descent. Sub-level 2 was markedly different from the others I'd seen. Where SL3 had been clinical and SL5 almost dungeon-like, SL2 was sleek and modern, all brushed metal and blinking indicators. This level housed the power systems for the entire project, massive arrays of equipment humming with barely contained energy. I moved cautiously, listening for any sign of the guards my contact had mentioned. The levels seemed to be divided into sections, each dedicated to a different aspect of power generation and distribution. I needed to find the systems specifically linked to the portal. My phone buzzed with a new message: Central Control Room. Follow the main conduit marking, yellow stripes on the floor. I spotted the markings and followed them through a maze of equipment until I reached a set of double doors marked Power Control Authorized Personnel Only. Another card swipe, another green light. The doors slid open to reveal a circular room dominated by a central column that pulsed with blue-white energy. The column rose from floor to ceiling, surrounded by control panels and monitoring stations. This had to be the power core my contact had mentioned. I approached one of the control panels, trying to make sense of the displays. Most of it was incomprehensible technical data, but one screen showed what was clearly a power distribution diagram. A large portion of the output was being directed to Aperture Mechanism, SL3. "How do I disable it without setting off alarms?" I texted. "You don't. Any disruption will trigger alerts. You need to make it look like a system failure, not sabotage." The contact sent another message with specific instructions, which relays to Cross, which cooling systems to disable, all timed to create a cascading failure that would appear to be a technical malfunction rather than deliberate damage. I set to work, following the instructions precisely. It was delicate, tense work, requiring concentration I could barely maintain with my nerves stretched to breaking point. Every sound made me freeze, certain I was about to be discovered. Just as I finished the last connection, I heard voices approaching from the corridor, the security guards making their rounds earlier than expected. I ducked behind a bank of equipment, heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. The doors slid open and two uniformed men entered, their conversation cutting off as they began their inspection of the systems. "Numbers look good," one said, checking a display. "No fluctuations in the containment field." "What about the aperture prep?" the other asked. "We're still green for Tuesday." "Far as I know. Wilson's team has been running simulations all week. He seems pretty confident this time. That's what they said in '95, and 3 people died. Different technology now, more control." They continued their checks, moving around the room in a practiced pattern. I remained frozen in my hiding spot, scarcely breathing, praying they wouldn't notice the subtle changes I'd made to the system. After what felt like an eternity, they finished their inspection and left, the doors sliding shut behind them. I waited another 5 minutes before emerging from my hiding place, legs trembling with tension. "Done," I texted. "Now what?" "Get to SL5. Take care of your grandfather, then get out." I made my way back to the freight elevator and pressed the button for SL5. As the car descended, I tried not to think too much about what I was about to do. Euthanize my own grandfather, or whatever was left of him, then flee. Leave behind the greatest scientific discovery in human history, corrupted into something monstrous. The elevator doors opened onto the now familiar red-lit corridor of sub-level 5. I moved quickly toward the laboratory I'd found earlier, listening for any sign of the white-haired scientist or other personnel. The lab was empty, the containment cells visible through the observation window just as I'd left them. I entered cautiously, making my way to the door marked medical suite at the far end of the room. That's where he would be, the thing that had once been Edward Harlow. The door wasn't locked. Inside was exactly what I'd seen in the video. A hospital-like room dominated by a single bed. The figure on it was connected to more tubes and monitoring equipment than I could count, its body so distorted it barely seemed human anymore. But the eyes, those were my grandfather's eyes. My eyes. They tracked to me as I entered, widening with what might have been recognition. "Grandfather," I whispered, approaching slowly. The thing on the bed made no sound, couldn't with a breathing tube down what passed for its throat, but its hand twitched, fingers elongated beyond human proportions stretching toward me. I fought back tears as I moved to the emergency panel my contact had described, a red cover on the wall near the door. Inside was a simple keypad and a button labelled Purge. "I'm sorry," I said, entering the code, 1983. I hope this brings you peace." My finger hovered over the Purge button. In that moment of hesitation, I noticed something on the nearest monitor, a readout labelled Neural Activity. The pattern seemed to shift as I watched, the chaotic spikes and valleys suddenly organising themselves into a regular, almost deliberate pattern, like Morse code. With growing horror, I realised I was seeing my grandfather, or whatever was using his body, trying to communicate. I found a notepad and pen on a nearby counter and began transcribing the pattern, translating the simple code as best I could remember from my brief stint as a Boy Scout. DONTTRUSTWILSON. "Don't trust Wilson," I whispered, the warning sending a chill through me. The pattern continued, more urgent now. NOTPORTALTRAP. Not portal, trap. I looked at the distorted face, those familiar eyes now wide with desperate urgency. THEYWANTINNOTOUT. They want in, not out, I translated aloud, the true nature of the project finally dawning on me. The thing on the bed, my grandfather, was trying to warn me. The portal wasn't built to explore other dimensions or travel to distant places. It was built because something on the other side wanted access to our world. And on Tuesday, they were planning to give it a permanent doorway. My grandfather's warning changed everything. I couldn't just sabotage the equipment and run, not if what he was saying was true. I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening, what Project Homecoming really meant. I abandoned the purge button and moved closer to the bed. "Can you tell me more?" "What are they? What do they want?" The neural monitor flickered as the pattern changed. NOTTHEYIT. "Not they, it?" I asked, watching the pattern. ONEENTITYMANYFORMS. One entity, many forms. The implications made my skin crawl. What kind of being could exist across multiple forms? And what did it want with our world? FEEDSONCHANGE. It feeds on change. I wasn't sure I understood. TRANSFORMATIONISFOOD. Transformation is food. I thought of Abernathy's distorted body, of the specimens in the containment cells, of my grandfather's own twisted form. They weren't just side effects of portal transit. They were the whole point. All these years they've been feeding it? Deliberately? I asked, horrified. YESPREPARING. Preparing for what? FULLINCURSION. Full incursion. Tuesday's scheduled activation wasn't just another test or experiment. It was an invitation. My phone buzzed insistently. Multiple messages from my mysterious contact. "Where are you?" "Guards alerted on SL5. Get out now." I looked back at my grandfather, torn between the urgent need to escape and the desperate desire for more information. "I'll stop it," I promised. "I'll find a way." The neural patterns spiked erratically, then settled into one final message. DESTROYPORTALKILLME. I swallowed hard, tears welling in my eyes. I will. I'll end this. I pressed the purge button without allowing myself another moment of hesitation. Alarms immediately began to wail throughout the sublevel, but they were quickly muffled as airtight seals engaged around the medical suite. A computerized voice announced, "Purge sequence initiated. Hail on deployment in 30 seconds. Evacuate immediately." I took one last look at my grandfather. His eyes, my eyes, held what seemed like peace, perhaps even gratitude. I whispered a goodbye and ran. The corridor outside was bathed in red emergency lighting, the alarm continuing to sound. I sprinted toward the utility passage I'd used before, hearing shouts and footsteps from the main access points. They were coming, but they didn't know about the maintenance routes yet. I climbed the access ladder to sub-level 4, then navigated through the darkened storage areas to find another ladder leading up to sub-level 3. This was risky. SL3 housed the portal chamber itself and would likely have the heaviest security presence during an alarm. But I needed to see it one more time to confirm that my sabotage of the power core had been effective. As I emerged onto sub-level 3, the alarm suddenly cut off, leaving an eerie silence broken only by the sound of my own ragged breathing. That couldn't be good. Either they'd contained whatever emergency my actions had triggered, or they'd manually overridden the system. I moved cautiously through the maintenance areas until I reached a service corridor that ran parallel to the main access route to the portal chamber. Through a small observation window, I could see into the chamber itself. The portal was active, not fully, not the stable aperture I'd seen in the demonstration, but something was happening within the circular frame. The air inside seemed to shimmer and ripple, occasionally flashing with bursts of blue-white energy. Technicians in protective gear were working frantically at the control panels while Wilson himself stood watching the portal, his expression a mixture of concern and anticipation. This wasn't right. My sabotage should have disabled the power core, not triggered a partial activation. Unless the entity on the other side was somehow providing its own energy. The thought sent a wave of cold dread through me. I needed a closer look. Moving as silently as possible, I made my way to the observation room adjacent to the chamber. It was empty, the staff apparently all needed for the emergency response in the chamber itself. I slipped inside and moved to the window, watching the activity beyond. The technicians were calling out readings, their voices tense and urgent. Aperture stability at 32% and fluctuating. Power surge from unknown source. Containment field holding but weakening. Wilson moved to the primary control console, typing in commands with rapid precision. "Redirect emergency power to the stability arrays," he ordered. "We need to either complete the activation or shut it down entirely. This partial state is dangerous." A female technician responded, "We can't shut it down, sir. The energy source is external. The portal is being opened from the other side." From the other side, just as my grandfather had warned. The entity wasn't waiting for Tuesday, it was trying to come through now. And then I heard it. A sound so faint I might have imagined it. A gentle tapping, coming from within the activated portal. Tap, tap, tap. Pause. Tap, tap, tap. Rule 7 echoed in my mind. If you hear knocking from within the portal when it's inactive, do not acknowledge it. Do not respond. Do not record it. But the portal wasn't inactive now. It was in some intermediate state between closed and open. Did the rule still apply? The tapping came again, more insistent this time. Several of the technicians exchanged uneasy glances, but no one spoke about the sound. Wilson tilted his head, listening. A slow smile spread across his face. Not the professional, controlled expression I'd seen before, but something almost rapturous. "It's time," he said softly, though his voice carried in the tense silence. "After all these years..." One of the technicians stepped away from his station. "Dr. Wilson, the containment protocols..." "Are no longer necessary," Wilson interrupted. "This is what we've been working toward. This is Project Homecoming. Sir, we're not scheduled for full activation until Tuesday. The safety measures aren't in place. The observation teams aren't ready. It's ready now, Wilson snapped, an uncharacteristic fervor in his voice. It's chosen now. With growing horror, I realized what was happening. Wilson wasn't just studying the portal or the entity beyond it. He was in communion with it. A willing servant, perhaps even a worshipper. The tapping changed, becoming a rhythmic pattern like the one my grandfather had used to communicate. Morse code. I found myself automatically translating LETMEINTOM. My blood froze. It knew my name. It was calling to me specifically. The sound grew louder, no longer tapping but a distinct knocking, as though someone was rapping their knuckles against a door. Several technicians backed away from the portal, looking unsettled. LETMEINGRANDSON. I felt a pull, not physical but mental. An almost overwhelming urge to approach the portal, to respond to the knocking, to welcome whatever waited on the other side. It was using my grandfather's memory somehow, using our connection to call to me. Wilson's head snapped toward the observation window, his eyes meeting mine with uncanny precision, as though he'd known I was there all along. He's here, he announced. The final Harlow, the key. That broke the spell. I stumbled back from the window as Wilson pointed directly at me, instructing security personnel to bring him in. Don't harm him. It needs him intact. I didn't wait to see more. I bolted from the observation room, running blindly through the corridors of sub-level 3, no longer caring about stealth or caution. I had to get out, had to get away from the knocking and Wilson's fanatical eyes. I found an emergency stairwell and took the steps 2 at a time, climbing toward the surface levels. Behind me, I could hear the pounding of security personnel in pursuit. My only advantage was my knowledge of the maintenance passages, allowing me to occasionally divert through service areas and emerge in unexpected places. By the time I reached the ground floor, alarms were sounding throughout the facility. I ducked into a janitor's closet, catching my breath and trying to think. The main exits would be guarded. The maintenance entrance I'd used to enter would likely be watched as well. My phone buzzed with a message from my contact. Launch Complex 39B, East Emergency Exit. Now, I didn't question it. Slipping back into the corridor during a momentary lull in the security patrols, I navigated toward the east wing of the facility. Twice I had to duck into doorways to avoid guards, my heart threatening to pound its way out of my chest. The emergency exit was where my contact had indicated, and miraculously unguarded. I pushed through it into the warm night air, the vast expanse of Launch Complex 39B stretching before me. Storage Shed 3, came another text. Key under South Foundation. I ran across the open ground, exposed and vulnerable, expecting at any moment to hear shouts or even gunshots, but I reached the indicated shed without incident, found the key and let myself in. The shed was larger inside than it appeared, filled with equipment and supplies. At the back was a tarp-covered vehicle, an old Jeep, dusty but apparently functional. The key was in the ignition. Another text. Drive Northwest Access Road. Gate code 6691. Don't stop until sunrise. I started the Jeep, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key. As I pulled out of the shed, headlights off to avoid detection, one final message came through. You're the last Harlow. Your blood is the key. They can't complete the connection without you. Stay away until we neutralize the portal for good. The Northwest Access Road was deserted, and the gate opened with the provided code. I drove through and accelerated into the night, leaving Cape Canaveral behind, but not the knocking. Even miles away with the windows down and the wind rushing past, I could still hear it in my mind. Tap, tap, tap. Calling me back, calling me home. I drove through the night in a state of near delirium, the events of the past few days playing on endless loop in my mind. The portal. My grandfather. Wilson's rapturous face as he listened to the knocking. the entity that had been manipulating NASA for decades, feeding on human transformation, waiting for the moment it could fully cross over. And somehow, I was the key. My blood, the Harlow bloodline, was crucial to its plans. Dawn found me at a rest stop near Ocala, over 100 miles from Cape Canaveral. I'd abandoned the Jeep in a Walmart parking lot and purchased a used Honda with cash from a private seller who didn't ask questions. My mysterious contact had gone silent, perhaps assuming I was safely away, or perhaps discovered and captured. I needed more information, not just about the portal or the entity, but about my own family's connection to it all. My grandfather hadn't simply been a random engineer caught in an accident. He'd been targeted, chosen somehow. And now, 40 years later, the same was happening to me. My mother had rarely spoken about her father, claiming his work at NASA was classified and that he died in an accident. But there had to be more. Records, personal effects, something that might explain why the Harlow bloodline was special. The last address I had for her was in Asheville, North Carolina. We'd been estranged for years, her drinking and my aimlessness creating a gulf neither of us had tried to bridge. But now I had no choice. I needed answers only she might have. I reached Asheville by nightfall, found a cheap motel, and collapsed into bed. For the first time since discovering the portal files, I slept deeply, exhaustion finally overwhelming fear. The knocking followed me into my dreams. Tap, tap, tap. A rhythmic, patient sound like someone who knows you're home but is too polite to shout. In the dream, I approached a door. Ordinary, wooden, painted white. The knocking came from the other side. Tap, tap, tap. "Who's there?" I called, though some part of me knew I shouldn't respond. A voice answered, not with words exactly, but with a feeling that translated into meaning. Family. I reached for the doorknob, my hand moving of its own accord. Just before my fingers touched the metal, I saw it begin to change, the white paint blistering and peeling away, the wood beneath writhing like something alive, growing translucent to reveal something moving on the other side. Not a person. Not anything human. I woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat despite the room's aggressive air conditioning. My phone was buzzing on the nightstand, an unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. "Hello? Thomas Harlow?" A woman's voice, professional, unfamiliar. "Who's asking?" "My name is Dr. Lydia Brenner. I worked with your grandfather at NASA. I sat up, instantly alert. "How did you find me?" "I've been monitoring the Portal Project's security alerts. Your name came up. I understand you've had a rather enlightening tour of the facility." "That's one way to put it," I said cautiously. "What do you want?" "To help you understand what you're dealing with, and to warn you, they'll be coming for you. Wilson has convinced the Oversight Committee that you're essential to Tuesday's activation." "Why? What's special about my blood?" Dr. Brenner was silent for a moment. "It's not just your blood, Thomas. It's your entire genetic structure. Your grandfather wasn't picked at random by the entity. He was deliberately selected because of a rare genetic marker, a mutation that occurs in less than 0.001% of the population." "What kind of mutation?" "We call it the Thorne-Harlow variant, after your grandfather and Dr. Thorne, who first identified it. In simplest terms, it creates a natural resonance with the quantum frequency of the portal. In less simple terms, people with the variant can serve as biological conduits, living doorways between dimensions. Your grandfather was the first identified carrier, but there have been others, all eventually used by the project." A chill ran through me. "Used how?" "Initially as observers or technicians, then as test subjects, finally as anchors." "Anchors?" "Think of the portal as a bridge. It needs support on both sides to remain stable. The entity provides the anchor on its side. We need one on ours." The implication hit me like a physical blow. "You're saying they want to use me as a living anchor for this thing? To keep the portal permanently open? Yes. Though living might be optimistic, the process would fundamentally transform you much as it did your grandfather. The difference is, he was only partially transformed, a failed attempt. With 40 years of research since then, they believe they can achieve a complete transformation with you. I felt sick. Why are you telling me this? Why help me? Because I was there in 1983 when your grandfather walked into that portal. I saw what came back wearing his face. I've spent 4 decades watching this project pervert science in service to an entity that views humanity as nothing more than raw material. I processed this, trying to think past the fear clouding my judgment. My mother, would she know about any of this? About the genetic marker? Possibly. Edward was protective of her, kept her away from the project, but he might have left something behind, something to warn future generations. I'm heading to see her tomorrow. Be careful. Your mother's location is likely known to Wilson's team. They may be watching her, hoping you'll make contact. Great, another complication. So, what do I do? Come to me instead. I have your grandfather's personal research, journals he kept before his transit. They might hold answers we both need. I hesitated. This could easily be a trap. How do I know I can trust you? You don't, but consider this. If I were working with Wilson, they'd already have you in custody. She had a point. Where are you? A research station in the Blue Ridge Mountains. I'll text you coordinates. Come alone and make sure you're not followed. After she hung up, I sat staring at my phone for a long time. Another mysterious contact offering information, another potential trap. But what choice did I have? If Wilson's people were watching my mother, going there would just put her in danger too. The coordinates arrived a few minutes later, along with a message. Arrive after dark. Watch for lights in the sky above the station. If there are any, don't approach. It means they've found me. I spent the day preparing, purchasing supplies and a better map of the mountain region. According to the coordinates, Dr. Brenner's research station was about 3 hours from Asheville, deep in the national forest. Remote, isolated, perfect for clandestine research or a perfect trap. I left at sunset, following winding mountain roads that grew progressively narrower and less maintained. The Honda struggled with some of the steeper inclines, but kept moving. By the time I reached the turnoff indicated on the map, full darkness had fallen. The forest around me a wall of impenetrable shadow. A rough logging road led into the trees, barely visible in my headlights. I followed it for nearly 2 miles before reaching a small clearing. A cabin stood at its center, rustic but well-maintained, with a generator humming quietly beside it. No other vehicles were visible, no lights in the sky as Brenner had warned about. I approached cautiously, one hand on the gun I'd purchased from a pawn shop that afternoon. Better to be paranoid than dead. Before I could knock, the door opened. A woman stood there, mid-60s, with silver hair cut in a practical bob and sharp eyes that evaluated me with scientific precision. "Thomas Harlow," she said, "you have his eyes. Come in quickly." I followed her into the cabin, which was surprisingly modern inside. One half functioned as a living area, the other as a laboratory. Computers, specialized equipment, and filing cabinets filled with papers. "Welcome to my exile," Dr. Brenner said, securing the door behind us. "I've been continuing Edward's original research here since I was forced out of NASA in 1998. Forced out? I asked too many questions about the ethical implications of the Portal project, suggested external oversight, raised concerns about Wilson's growing obsession with the entity. She shrugged. The usual whistleblower treatment, discredited, accused of mental instability, eventually pushed into early retirement. She led me to a workable covered with journals, dozens of them, filled with my grandfather's handwriting. Edward suspected something was wrong with the Portal project from the beginning, she explained. The discoveries came too easily, the theoretical breakthroughs too convenient. He documented his concerns in these journals, keeping them separate from his official research. I picked up the nearest journal, opening to a random page. Diagrams of the portal filled the margins, alongside notes in my grandfather's precise handwriting. Portal configuration revised again based on anomalous data. Third time this month, we've altered fundamental specifications due to readings that contradict previous models. Bennett insists we're simply refining our understanding. But these aren't refinements, they're completely new approaches that somehow work perfectly on first implementation, as though something is guiding us toward a specific design. I flipped forward several pages. Wilson brought in a new theory today about interdimensional resonance requiring a biological component. Came to him in a dream, he said. The others found this amusing. I did not. Too many dreams lately. Too many convenient inspirations. He was already suspicious, I said, looking up at Brenner, before he went through. She nodded. Edward believed something was influencing the research team, subtly manipulating their perceptions, introducing ideas through dreams and intuitive leaps that seemed like brilliance but were actually external guidance. Like a parasite manipulating its host's behavior, I murmured. Precisely. By the time he realized what was happening, the portal was already operational in its basic form. He couldn't convince the others of his concerns. They were too far under the entity's influence. So he made a decision. I turned to the final entries in the journal, dated just days before my grandfather's transit. No choice now. Entity growing stronger with each test. Must see what lies beyond. Must understand what we're dealing with to have any hope of stopping it. If I don't return, these journals should serve as warning. The portal is not ours. We did not discover it. We were led to create it. The final page held a simple diagram, a DNA helix with specific sections highlighted and annotated with complex formulas. Below it, a single line, Harlow bloodline, key to closure. Not opening. I looked up at Brenner, the implications becoming clear. He went through voluntarily, not because he was called, but to gather intelligence. She nodded. And what came back was neither your grandfather nor the entity, but something in between. A hybrid, partially transformed, but retaining enough of Edward's consciousness to continue his mission. That's why they kept him alive all these years, I realized. Not just for the compounds they could harvest, but because they couldn't completely control him. He was still fighting, still trying to warn people. Yes, and now you have to finish what he started. Brenner moved to a safe hidden behind a painting, removed a small metal case and placed it on the table. This is what Edward prepared before he went through, his contingency plan. Inside the case was a syringe filled with amber liquid, alongside a letter addressed simply, "To my descendant." My hands trembled as I opened it. If you're reading this, I failed to stop what's coming. The entity has continued its work, manipulating human agents to build its doorway into our world. You who carry my blood are its final target. Our genetic structure is the key it needs. But what opens can close. The formula I've prepared will alter your specific genetic markers, not enough to remove them completely, but enough to reverse their function. Instead of anchoring the portal open, you will force it closed. Permanently. The cost is high. The formula itself is derived from my own exposed tissue, combined with compounds that will trigger a controlled cellular mutation. It will be painful. It may be fatal, but it is the only way to ensure the entity remains trapped in its own realm. I'm sorry to place this burden on you, but there is no one else. The Thorne-Harlow variant exists only in our bloodline. Whatever you decide, know that I made my choice willingly, with full knowledge of the consequences. The same choice now falls to you. Brenner watched me as I read, her expression somber. The formula was incomplete when he went through, she explained. I've spent decades finishing it, using samples from his transformed tissue. And it will work? I asked, staring at the syringe. In theory. It will alter your genetic structure to create a repulsive force rather than an attractive one when in proximity to the portal. But Edward was right about the cost. The mutation will be extensive, likely fatal within days. So, my choices are die to close the portal or live as a monstrous anchor keeping it open. Brenner's eyes held compassion, but no false hope. I'm afraid so. The knocking returned then, not from any door or window, but inside my mind. Tap, tap, tap. Calling me back to Cape Canaveral, back to the portal, back to my destiny as the key. Outside, the sound of helicopters suddenly filled the air. "They've found us," Brenner said, looking up sharply. "We're out of time." I'm writing this from a motel outside Titusville, not far from where it all began. My hands shake constantly now, not from fear, but from the changes spreading through my body. The syringe's contents have been circulating in my bloodstream for 3 days. Dr. Brenner didn't make it out of the cabin. She stayed behind to destroy her research while I escaped through a hidden tunnel that led deep into the forest. Her last words to me: "Finish this." The helicopters belonged to a private military contractor hired by Wilson. I saw their insignia as they landed. I don't know what they did to her. I hope it was quick. The formula works differently than I expected. There's pain, yes, but also moments of startling clarity. Visions, perhaps hallucinations, of the place beyond the portal. A vast, empty plain under a sky like shattered glass. A single entity spread across it like a web, pulsing with hunger, with patient malevolence. I understand now why my grandfather walked into the portal willingly. He needed to see, to know what we were facing. And in his way, he succeeded. He kept fighting for 40 years, a fragment of consciousness trapped in a mutated shell, gathering information and waiting for someone who could finish what he started. It's almost time. According to the facility schedules I found in Dr. Brenner's files, Project Homecoming begins in 3 hours. A full portal activation using every bit of power they can generate. Wilson believes I'll be drawn there automatically as the aperture forms, my altered genetics acting like a beacon. He's right, but not in the way he thinks. The knocking is constant now. Tap, 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 in my dreams, in quiet moments, sometimes even overlaying people's voices when they speak to me. It's calling me home, it says, promising reunion, transcendence, evolution beyond my limited human form. Lies. All lies, from a thing that views us as nothing but food and tools. I can feel the changes accelerating. My reflection this morning showed distended features, pupils stretched into vertical slits. The motel manager gave me a wide berth when I paid for another night, his expression suggesting he'd seen his share of meth addicts and considered me just another lost cause. If Dr. Brenner's calculations are correct, the formula will reach maximum effectiveness right when the portal achieves full stability. Perfect timing for what needs to be done. I'll be drawn there as Wilson expects, but instead of becoming their anchor, I'll become their ending. My grandfather understood the symmetry of it all. The entity guided us to create its doorway, manipulating human brilliance to serve its purposes. Now a human will turn that same doorway into a trap, using the entity's own methods against it. There's elegance in that. A certain cosmic justice. To whoever finds these notes, I'm not a hero, just a guy who messed up his life and stumbled into something bigger than himself. Remember the rules, especially number 7. If you hear knocking from within the portal when it's inactive, do not acknowledge it. Do not respond. Do not record it. The knocking is how it finds you, how it marks you, how it begins the slow process of turning you into its tool. I can see the space center from my window, lights blazing despite the late hour. They're preparing, gathering, readying themselves for the arrival of their god. Wilson will be there, radiant with anticipation, prepared to sacrifice me for his transcendent purpose. I'm ready too. The knocking has stopped. I think it knows what's coming. Time to go home. Thomas Edward Harlow. April 7th, 2023.